Hello YouTube, this is the Student Witch again, and this is part 2 of my mini-series, just 2 video series, of how did I know that I was a witch. And if you check out my previous video, you'll know that I talked about some of my family roots, some personal experiences from my childhood, some of my very first memories, and also some of my personal experiences as an empath. And I just wanted to add to that really quickly. I'll try to make this video a little bit shorter than the last one. Like I said in the previous video, since I started this new spiritual path this last year or so, I've been going through the catalog of memories in my mind and realizing how these memories are witchy. They've contributed to my witchiness. In the previous video I talked about some of the folkloric things that I grew up with in rural Kentucky that, you know, just showed how pagan-y, folkloric teachings kind of just permeated the culture. I also talked about some of my family roots. My family, I identify as a rural working class kind of background. That's where I come from. I'm a first generation college student. I'm actually the most educated person on both sides of my family because, to my knowledge, there's only 3 of us on my mom's side and my dad's side who have a 4-year college degree. And since I have a master's and I'm in a PhD program now, I'm the most educated person, which is kind of mind-boggling. So I talked about my roots, I talked about going through those memories, and so I was sitting here thinking about what I was going to say for this video, and I remembered that my grandmother had a tarot deck, my father's mother, so my paternal grandmother. She had a tarot deck, and I only have a couple of memories of her showing it to us. I think she was kind of hesitant to show it to me and my sister, and we were just kids. I was in elementary school. But that was a memory I completely forgot about, and I didn't remember until I found myself being attracted to learning the tarot. And I'm still very much a novice when it comes to that. But, you know, so that kind of brings me to the question of, is a witch born or is he or she made? And most people that I've read or seen on YouTube or talked to, you know, they say it's a little bit of both, and I'm gonna agree with them on that. As far as, well, up to this point, you know, I'm still a newbie and I still have a while to go. It's a lifelong process, right? So maybe I'll change my mind later on, but I do think it's a little bit of both. I'm not sure if thinking of witchiness as a talent or something in the blood or something that's passed on through generations, or as a potential. Maybe everyone has a potential ability to manipulate their environment in that magical way. I'm going to say it like that. I don't know. But a part of me does think that it is something born and something made. It might be an ability that you're born with that you have to develop, or an affinity, if that's a better PC or a more PC of a term than ability or talent. But I do think that some of my witchiness comes from my grandmother, my father's mother. She was a tough woman. She had a very hard life. She died fairly young for today's standards. She was only 69. She died when I was 12 years old of pancreatic cancer. You know, she almost died when she was young because she had kidney issues. She had a near-death experience in which she encountered this old man coming to her through her bedroom window. And he took her to a field. This is from what I remember, what she told me. this old man with a long white beard took her to this field of flowers, and she remembers feeling so peaceful and so happy, but then he told her, "It's not your time yet, you have to go back." And I remember she told me as a little kid in that near-death experience, she felt pissed because she didn't want to go back. So she went back. She later, as a young adult, had to have one of her kidneys removed, and then she lost the first 3 of her children. She had a boy who died as an infant, and then she had a set of twins who were born, who died at birth. So she lost 3 of her children, and she just had a very rough life. So when it came time for her, when she found out that she had pancreatic cancer, she decided not to seek any treatment. She was ready. She was ready to move on. And that was very brave of her. So as a small child, I stood at her bedside. We all did, my parents and my sister and everybody. We were standing at her bedside at home when she passed. And that was very sad, but also a very beautiful moment. And I thank her for sharing that with me. So I'll go back to her because she's actually shown herself to me a few times since she died at very crucial moments in my life. And that is another sign to me of my witchiness. So just going back through those memories and going back through those family roots and realizing that maybe it is in my blood and maybe it's about, it's high time that I start listening to it. One thing I want to touch on as an empath, I've also had people pick up on the energies that I was sending out. Like I mentioned in the previous video, when I was in college, before I learned everything about being an empath and about all of this, I thought something was wrong with me because I was so emotionally sensitive and just different. I don't know how else to explain it, but I was going through a really rough period. I had some rough situations at home, and all the stress of school and being that first-generation college student, and I got into a very prestigious private liberal arts school, and I felt different from everybody because most of my friends came from more privileged backgrounds than I did, so I just felt like I felt alone. I felt completely isolated because I didn't completely fit in there, and I didn't completely fit back in Kentucky either. Like once you leave, that experience changes you, and you can't just go back and things be the way they were. So at one point I found myself like seeking treatment and taking antidepressants, which I don't take anymore, thankfully. And one of the nurses in this clinic that I was in, I remember he was like a middle-aged black man, and he was handing my medication to me, and he said, "Whoa." He put his hands up like this and said, "Whoa, I can feel your peace from here. You're at peace, aren't you?" He must have been a sensitive too. And I said, "You know what? I am at peace," because at that moment I had realized that a lot of my issues with depression were issues that I had control over. And I'm not saying this is everybody with depression, this is me and my dealings with depression, okay? I realized, and I actually read this poem by Walt Whitman, and he is my favorite American poet by far. And he has a poem called Song of the Open Road, and I actually got a tattoo of a selection of the 5th stanza of this poem, because after reading that poem, like, there's a before and an after. It's one of those kind of bifurcation points in one's life. And I'll show you the tattoo. It's in Bilbo script. because I'm a nerd. But it's the second half down here. From this hour, I ordain myself loosed of imaginary lines and limits. So from this hour, from the moment of reading that poem, I ordained myself free. All those imaginary lines and limits, all those chains that I felt were holding me down, I realized I can just take them off. And I did. And I've never been the same ever since. So that was another magical moment for me, that small interaction with that nurse. I never saw him again, but he gave me a gift that day. So that kind of leads me to another set of experiences, or another category of experiences that also tell me that I'm a witch. Weird visions that I've had since I was a kid. In the previous video I mentioned a vision of a small little green creature that I saw, which I guess you could call a fairy or something, I don't know. But I've had more visions of animals that weren't really there than I have of people or humanoid things. I have seen one ghost. I actually saw it at the same time that my best friend, who's also a little witchy, she saw it. So we both saw the same ghost at the same time, so I know it was there. And we were at a friend's house, and that friend had told us that they had had some paranormal activity ever since they moved in. But yeah, most of my weird experiences and visions were either dreams or with animals. So on the animal side, when I was a little kid, I was playing in my grandparents' backyard, and at that time there was cow fields. If you go over the fence of their backyard, there were cow fields. Now it's a subdivision, but at that time it was pretty rural still. And their neighbor's house had a lot of trees. It was like a mini forest back there, and I was playing by myself, and I swear, it looked like some sort of mountain lion. And in Kentucky, as far as I know, we have bobcats, but we don't have mountain lions. And I think I blinked and it disappeared, but I was so scared I just hightailed it back inside, just in case. So I would see animals that weren't really there. When I was in college, when I was going through that rough time, I was walking home from the gym, and this is me as an adult, not as a kid. Because some people might say, oh, kids make stuff up all the time, but no, this is me as a 20-year-old adult. I was walking home from the gym. It was late at night, but the campus was so small and so safe, there was nothing really to fear, or so I thought. And I wasn't really paying attention. I just had my iPod in, and I was listening to music, just walking home from the gym at around 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night to my dorm room, and I look up, and for about 2 or 3 seconds I see this big black dog charging at me. And the second my adrenaline hit and I start to brace myself, the dog disappears right when it jumps up into the air like it's going to attack me. I have no doubt that that really happened. So I know I've done a little bit of reading into Hecate and how she's associated with the black dog or the Grimm or whatever. I don't know what it was. It was a threatening presence. It was a threatening spirit or whatever. And it just lunged at me, and right when it lunged at me, it disappeared in midair. That was a very frightening experience. As far as dreams go, and this is where I'm going to bring my grandmother back in, she died when I was 12. She has come to me and spoken to me in my dreams twice. Once, when I was going through that tough time in college, right before I started seeking help for my undiagnosed, untreated depression. She came to me, and I remember in the dream we were at my grandparents' house. My grandfather was in his usual recliner. My parents were on one sofa, and my sister was there, I think. And my grandmother was at the place where she used to sit and play cards and smoke cigarettes. But in my dream, I knew she was dead. I knew something was weird. And I would turn to everybody in the dream and say, look, do you see this? It's grandmother. She's right there. It's grandma. What is she doing here? But no one else was paying attention to me. No one else saw her. No one else could hear her. She was just speaking to me. And I don't consciously remember what she told me in the dream. My intuition tells me that she was comforting me and kind of warning me that a tough time was coming. And she was telling me that everything was going to be all right. So that happened like early fall semester of my junior year of college. The second time she came to me was when I came to my master's program. It was my first semester in my master's program. And she came to me in my dream again. She just spoke just to me. And she was also telling me that something very important was about to happen. But I didn't know what at the time. I got the feeling, though, that it wasn't something like a rough time that I was going to go through. Rather, it was something to look forward to. And actually, sure enough, the following January, I met the man that was going to be my husband. So yeah, she's come to me twice. And the last vision dream that I had, I have it written on my notes as the big vision, and I underlined it. This one's kind of weird, and I have no idea how to understand this. So that first semester of my master's program, before I met my husband, but after I had spoken to my grandmother, I was living alone in my apartment. I didn't really know many people because I am introverted, and I was nervous and scared about starting this new graduate program. I lived 8 hours away from my parents. I lived 8 hours away from my closest friends. I was on my own. So I went to bed. I did not drink anything that night. I did not take any weird psychedelic drugs. I was not and am not on any medication right now, or at the time, but I was in the middle of a dream in which I was driving around this old country road. The type of country road that's surrounded by trees on each side, and it's going up a mountain. And as I was about to approach the top of the hill, all of a sudden everything changed. I opened my eyes. I was awake. I opened my eyes. And I wasn't in my bedroom anymore. I felt like someone took a slingshot. You know, you put the stone in the slingshot and you pull it back and then you let go. I felt like I was the stone. Like someone let go and I was just like shot into the universe. I felt like I was flying upwards, and I remember feeling like I was being pushed back in my bed. So when I opened my eyes, I felt like I was flying upwards, and instead of seeing the ceiling of my bedroom, I saw the night sky. And there was thousands and thousands of stars, like white light stars in the darkness. And the stars started moving, and they formed faces, and there's about 2 or 3 humanoid faces that smiled down upon me. So the experience was scary because I didn't know what the hell was going on, and I still don't really know what to make of it. But it wasn't scary in that I felt like my life was threatened. Actually, the only thought that could come to my mind at that moment was, if this is what it's like to die, there's nothing to fear. That was the first and only thought that came to my mind as I saw these faces smiling down upon me. And then all of a sudden I blinked and I moved, and boom, I was right back in my bedroom. I checked the clock. It was like 4:27 in the morning. This happened in November of 2011. I have it written down because I can't remember if I immediately wrote the experience down or I waited till the morning, but I wrote that shit down. And I have no idea, was it an out-of-body experience? Was it aliens? I don't like to think that it was aliens, and I'm not a big fan of aliens because I watched too much X-Files as a kid. But I don't know what it was, but I do feel like that something out there was communicating to me and made that connection with me. And it was peaceful and powerful and beautiful. So that's the weirdest experience, most powerful spiritual experience of my life so far. So that happened fairly recently. As you know, I was an adult. There's no denying, there's no excuses like, oh, she was a little kid, she was seeing things or making shit up. No, I was, how old was I? Like 22, 23 at the time? Oh, my husband is home. Mi amor! I'm making a video.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
I'm gonna have to edit.
Oh man, it was hot outside. So, yeah, all those visions and dreams and whatnot, things that I can't easily explain. All of those happened at the same time that I was leaving Catholicism. Like I said, I was raised Roman Catholic, but my family, we converted to Catholicism because I was baptized as a young child in the Episcopalian Church. But then when we moved to Kentucky, my mom became friends with one of our neighbors, and she was Catholic, and she invited us to the church, and so that led us to be converted. I converted when I was in 2nd grade, when it came time for my first communion. But when I went to college, I started learning too much. And I started taking classes in the Women's and Gender Studies department on feminism and queer studies and queer theory, and I couldn't maintain the contradictions anymore. And actually, ever since I was a little kid, there were doctrines about the church that I disagreed with. I stopped believing in hell, for example, when I was 10 years old, because I just thought, that's some shit they made up to scare people, to force them to convert, basically. So I had too many questions ever since I was a little kid, but it was always a struggle, and there was always pressure at home to keep it up. But then when I went to college and I gained a little bit more freedom and also a lot more self-confidence, I decided to leave it for good. I did flirt with Christianity again when I went to my master's program, but then after I had that vision, and then after I met my husband and he was leaving Christianity at the same time, no, it's for good. I'm never going back. I have too many issues with it, with the history, and the theory and the practice of it. So that kind of left the doors open. So I'm not Christian anymore. What am I? So my husband and I actually started working with crystals about 3 years ago, making crystal grids, because we both had some not too serious but annoying health issues going on, and the grids worked. And so we started researching more and more about it. We changed our diets. We started eating more organically. I mean, keep in mind, we're both like poor grad students. So we can't afford the best of everything, but we did what we could. We changed our mindsets. We started exploring. He went kind of the more esoteric route, reading about esoteric and occult knowledge, alchemy and the Kabbalah and Gnosticism and things like that, and I went the witchy route. So we're feeding off of each other and learning with and from each other. So I really turned to witchcraft when I moved to Massachusetts last August, and I was by myself. My husband was finishing still is finishing his PhD down here in Georgia. I was beginning mine in Massachusetts. I was scared. I was alone. And like I've said before, I was at a very prestigious, powerful university. And keep in mind, I'm a rural, working class Kentucky girl. There's not many first generation college students at this university. Most people that are there, not all, but most do come from they come from middle or upper class, like upper class economic backgrounds. And so again, like I did in college, I felt out of place. I don't feel 100% like I belong in Kentucky because I got out. I mean, I love it, but I could never go back and live there unless I worked at a university. But I also did not feel like I fit in at this university in Massachusetts. So I felt alone, and I was scared and stressed out, and it was just, the first semester there was just terrible. So I turned to witchcraft, especially Appalachian root work and conjure, because like I said before, I have family in Appalachia. I turned to that route because it just made sense at the time. It gave me a place of belonging that I created for myself, and it gave me the strength to get through it, and I did. I've survived my first year there. I have about 5 more years to go. But yeah, that's how I came to witchcraft and how I knew that I was a witch. Alright, I know this video is epically long and I've had to do some editing and cutting, but I'm going to end on the same note that I began, or on the same note that I began, with Orion Foxwoods, The Flame and the Cauldron. And I'm ending with this because he says that there are 4 main illusions, or problems that humanity as a whole, he's speaking as a whole, that humanity is dealing with as far as our connection or lack of connection with the universe, the earth, nature, creation, whatever you want to call it. He says, I'll just start at the beginning of the paragraph. I call these dampers because they dampen the vibrancy of the soul's aliveness, which in my practices is seen as a fountain of blue flame that rises from the center of our being. There are 4 dampers, or illusions. 1. The illusion of isolation and associated abandonment pain or shame. 2. The desire to possess and associated control issues, fueled by fear. 3. The resentment of change and associated terror of the rhythms of life. And lastly, 4. The desire for absoluteness, or the desperate attempts to make life predictable and beholden to our fears of abandonment. So these 4 dampers, or illusions, that he speaks of in this book, witchcraft to me is a way to free myself from them. The first illusion, which is isolation, the illusion that we are somehow separated from each other and from the rest of creation or our environment or nature. The second desire, which the desire to possess and control, which is fueled by fear. That is definitely seen in consumerism, in sick behavior between people, like codependent relationships, unhealthy relationships based on control and fear. And even and when I say relationships, I was talking about relationships between people, but we can also say this need to control, which is fueled by our fear of abandonment, controlling our environment, controlling our possessions, being jealous, not trusting each other, abusing the environment definitely fits within that. The resentment of change and the terror of the rhythms of life, that fear of death. And witchcraft, to me, it views death as just a part of life. It's a necessary part of life. You can't have life without death. They're two sides to the same coin. And ultimately, nobody really knows what happens after we die. You know, people have their own beliefs or their own theories, but until you go through it, you don't know. I mean, there is a very strong possibility that we just stop existing. I don't think that's the way it is, but I'm also going to recognize that I don't 100% know. I'm not going to start proclaiming that I have the truth. And that leads to the fourth illusion, the desire for absoluteness, this need to claim that you have the absolute truth. And I don't mean to pick on Christians, but I mean, I live in the United States and I used to be one, so it's just what's familiar to me. But that claim to have that absolute truth, the one and only truth, the one and only God, and this could probably be said of all three of the major monotheistic religions, as well as the scientific paradigm. Why are we so afraid of uncertainty? Why is there such a need to be able to say, I have it right, you have it wrong. If you don't believe what I believe, you're going to hell. Or if you don't believe, or if you don't exist the way I do, I'm going to invade your country. I mean, this kind of need for absoluteness, it permeates many aspects of human life on this planet, and it has caused the deaths of thousands, probably millions of people. It's led to wars. You know, if it's not the Catholic Church going to war against the Protestant Reformation in, you know, the early modern period, then it's, you know, the capitalist countries going to war against the communist countries in the 20th century. It's the same shit. Same exact shit. Like, that need to claim that your way is the right way and everybody else is wrong. That's egotistical, and it just leads to violence. And so one of the beauties of witchcraft is that not only does it reconnect me or help me to reconnect with everyone and everything around me, because I see that spirit is in everything and everyone around me, it helps me accept the cycles of life and appreciate them and see the beauty in them. It helps me see that instead of ordering the world into dichotomies, I see dualistic systems in which the dualities of life and death, for example, when they are combined together, they create something more than just the mere synthesis of the duality. They are part of the greater cycle. And it has helped me be okay with uncertainty. Or just okay with diversity of thought. Okay with kind of taking a step back, admitting what I don't know, and starting from there instead of this obsessive need to have security or a false sense of security, because it's security based on being able to say that I'm right and you're wrong. Basically, it's what it boils down to. And like I was just saying, that can lead to some very sick and violent behavior, whether it's behavior between two people or two nations, two religions. I ultimately, I wanted to end on that note, on Foxwood's note, and to say I'm very excited to be on this path, and I'm finally kind of opening my eyes and reassessing my past, my personal history, and saying, yes, I am a witch. So, sorry this video is epically long. Sorry if I got preachy toward the end, but whatever. That's me. Thank you so much for watching and for welcoming me into this community, and I look forward to a lifetime of learning. Blessed be.